Within the subterranean bunkers, nestled beneath Tokyo's Imperial General Headquarters, the low thrum of fluorescent lighting permeated the air. It was precisely 8:30 a.m. on the 6th day of August in 1945, and the oppressive, humid atmosphere of summer seemed to bear the immense burden of a nation embroiled in a relentless conflict for nearly 4 arduous years. Inside these concealed command centers, staff officers, their khaki uniforms visibly darkened with perspiration, hunched intently over expansive communication boards. Their meticulous work involved strategically placing pins on colossal wall maps, which visually depicted the ever-diminishing territorial boundaries of the Japanese Empire. Through these tense corridors, General Koichika Anami, the esteemed War Minister of Japan, moved with an unyielding posture, characteristic of a seasoned military professional who had seemingly never encountered defeat. At the age of 58, his rugged, battle-hardened countenance exuded the profound assurance of an individual utterly convinced of Japan's preordained divine destiny. The customary morning briefing was anticipated to unfold as a standard procedure, a collation of overnight dispatches from various garrison commanders stationed across the home islands, alongside crucial updates on the colossal Ketsugo defense preparations. These elaborate measures were meticulously devised to inflict such prohibitive losses upon any American invasion force that the adversary would be compelled to seek terms for peace. However, an unsettling anomaly had begun to manifest. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The communication panel designated for the Chugoku Military District displayed an eerie blankness. There were no routine morning reports emanating from Hiroshima as 2nd General Army Headquarters, nor any fresh intelligence from the approximately 400,000 civilians and military personnel residing in what was then Japan's 8th largest metropolis. The dedicated operators diligently manipulated their radio dials, but instead of the expected familiar crackle of field dispatches, they were met with nothing but persistent, unnerving static. "Sir," a junior communications officer stammered, beads of sweat glistening on his brow, despite the cool, controlled environment of the underground facility. "We have experienced a complete loss of contact with Hiroshima. All military frequencies, all civilian radio channels, everything ceased transmitting at approximately 8:15 this morning." General Anami's dark eyes narrowed perceptibly. Over the course of 4 years of relentless, total warfare, it was simply inconceivable for entire cities to inexplicably vanish from the communication network. This was especially true for urban centers hosting significant military headquarters, cities that, mere hours prior, had been diligently reporting normal defensive readiness. The profound question lingered: what unimaginable force on Earth possessed the capability to instantly silence 340,000 souls? To truly comprehend the unfolding events, one must grasp the prevailing mentality of the 6 influential figures who held Japan's destiny in their hands during August 1945. They were collectively known as the Supreme War Council, or more informally, the Big Six, and they harbored a steadfast conviction that they alone possessed the strategic keys to ultimate victory, even as relentless American B-29 bombers systematically reduced their cities to smoldering ruins night after night. This formidable group comprised General Anami, Admiral Soemu Toyoda, General Yoshijiro Umezu, Prime Minister Admiral Kantaro Suzuki, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, and Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai. 6 men, whose collective decisions would determine the fate of 70 million lives poised precariously in the balance. Yet a critical factor fueled their perilously misplaced confidence. They were privy to deeply guarded secrets that the Americans could scarcely conceive. Since 1940, Japan had been engaged in an intense clandestine endeavor to develop its own atomic bomb, pursuing this goal through 2 distinct initiatives: the Army's NIGO project, spearheaded by the brilliant Dr. Yoshio Nishina, and the Navy's FGO program, under the direction of Dr. Bunsaku Arakatsu. These were far from amateurish undertakings. Dr. Nishina, in particular, stood as one of the preeminent nuclear physicists globally, a scholar who had honed his expertise alongside the legendary Niels Bohr in Copenhagen. His profound understanding of the theoretical underpinnings of atomic fission was arguably unmatched by almost any living contemporary. And it was this very depth of knowledge that had led him to a pivotal conclusion. The actual construction of atomic bombs was, practically speaking, an insurmountable challenge. The sheer scale of uranium enrichment alone necessitated industrial infrastructure that defied imagination, colossal electromagnetic separation facilities, the processing of thousands of tons of raw uranium ore, and an electrical power consumption that would be sufficient to deplete the resources of entire geographical regions. Japan's most distinguished scientists had meticulously calculated that even the formidable United States, with its vast and untouched industrial base, could realistically hope to manufacture perhaps 1 or 2 atomic weapons at most, and certainly no more than 3, only if their efforts had commenced far earlier than anyone could have suspected. Consequently, when the initial morning reports began to trickle in, fragmented, contradictory, and almost beyond belief, the military leadership summarily dismissed them. Their reactions were imbued with the absolute certainty of individuals who believed they possessed superior insider knowledge. A limited number of B-29s launched an assault on Hiroshima with a novel type of ordnance. Substantial devastation has been observed, stated the first relatively coherent dispatch from a reconnaissance aircraft. Admiral Toyota, who held the critical position of Chief of the Naval General Staff, scarcely diverted his gaze from his intricate strategic maps. Considerable damage inflicted by just a few bombers, he mused, a hint of skepticism in his voice. He himself had endured countless massive B-29 raids that had already obliterated 42 major Japanese cities. He concluded it was most likely a highly concentrated incendiary assault. The Americans are simply becoming more tactically efficient, he surmised. However, as the hours steadily elapsed, the incoming reports became increasingly bizarre and alarming. Train services bound for Hiroshima had been indefinitely suspended. Military communication channels remained utterly severed. Most disquieting of all, a weather reconnaissance plane submitted a report detailing an unprecedented sight: a colossal mushroom-shaped cloud ascending to an astonishing altitude of nearly 40,000 feet into the atmosphere. Then came the momentous radio announcement from President Truman, broadcast via shortwave and intercepted by vigilant Japanese monitors. 16 hours ago, an American aircraft released a single bomb on Hiroshima, a significant Japanese army base. That singular bomb possessed more destructive force than 20,000 tons of TNT. It is, in fact, an atomic bomb. A profound silence enveloped the Supreme War Council meeting room, so intense it was almost deafening. General Anami eventually broke the stillness, his voice meticulously modulated with the practiced calm of a seasoned military officer. "The Americans are undoubtedly engaging in psychological warfare," he declared. "Even if they have managed to develop some rudimentary form of atomic device, the immense technical demands render mass production utterly unfeasible. Our own exhaustive research unequivocally confirms this assessment." Admiral Toyota nodded in grim agreement. If the Americans genuinely possessed an arsenal of such formidable weapons, they would have deployed them months ago. This is unequivocally a desperate maneuver, perhaps representing their sole such device. What these leaders could not possibly grasp was the ironic truth that their very scientific expertise had, in fact, become their most profound vulnerability. Their meticulous atomic research had indeed elucidated the extraordinary difficulty of the task, but it had simultaneously blinded them to the unparalleled industrial capabilities of the United States, a capacity they simply could not fathom. The Manhattan Project, an undertaking of unprecedented scale, had enlisted 130,000 workers spanning multiple states, consumed more electrical power than entire nations, and stood as the largest clandestine industrial endeavor in the annals of human history. The Japanese military leaders were making critical decisions based on what their scientific understanding dictated was possible, yet they were confronting an adversary that had fundamentally redefined the very boundaries of possibility itself. As the 6th of August transitioned into the 7th, and as the initial horrifying details began to arrive from the intrepid investigation teams rushing towards Hiroshima's obliterated ruins, these 6 men clung stubbornly to their ingrained certainties with the desperate tenacity of drowning sailors clutching at fragments of debris. They remained utterly unaware that their entire world, as they knew it, was on the precipice of an irreversible transformation. The world as these individuals knew it was poised on the precipice of an irreversible transformation. The unfolding events were destined not merely to dismantle their established military strategies, but to fundamentally redefine their very conception of warfare. Dr. Yoshio Nishina, a brilliant physicist, possessed a profound theoretical comprehension of the atomic bomb's destructive potential, having meticulously reviewed the intricate calculations. Yet the vast expanse separating abstract theory from tangible reality could only be bridged through direct, visceral experience. It was this daunting chasm that Nishina tragically traversed on August 7, 1945. His 11-hour train journey from the bustling metropolis of Tokyo to the desolated ruins of Hiroshima unfolded through an increasingly surreal and disquieting landscape. For many miles preceding his arrival at the city's periphery, Nishina observed a haunting tableau: trees stripped bare of their foliage, telephone poles fractured and splintered like fragile matchsticks, and a pervasive acrid odor that seared his nostrils with its chemical intensity. Ultimately, the train ground to an abrupt halt, its progress impeded by tracks ahead that had been grotesquely contorted into incomprehensible spirals by forces utterly defying rational explanation. Nishina then proceeded on foot for the concluding 5 miles into what had once been the vibrant city of Hiroshima. Nothing, not even his deepest scientific understanding, had adequately prepared him for the horrifying spectacle that confronted his gaze. Buildings had not simply crumbled, they had been utterly vaporized, reduced to nothingness. Ethereal human shadows were indelibly seared into concrete walls. Stark, ghostly outlines of individuals who had been engaged in their routine morning commute, when the fateful moment of 8:15 a.m. irrevocably became the final instant of their earthly existence. The hypocenter, The precise point where the bomb had detonated, approximately 1,000 feet above the ground, was a perfectly circular expanse of absolute obliteration, extending for miles in every cardinal direction. Yet, most profoundly disturbing of all were the survivors. Nishina, a man whose entire professional life had been devoted to the relentless pursuit of scientific enlightenment, found himself confronted by the harrowing reality of radiation sickness, a terrifying phenomenon that, until this moment, had resided exclusively within the pages of theoretical physics papers. He witnessed victims whose very skin was literally sloughing from their bodies, individuals violently expelling blood, their hair falling out in grotesque clumps, a procession of the living dead staggering aimlessly through a landscape of ruins that bore an eerie resemblance to the desolate surface of an alien world. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment below about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Nishina's hands trembled uncontrollably as he meticulously took measurements with his Geiger counter, the device's frantic clicking intensifying to an alarming crescendo as he drew nearer to ground zero. This was not merely an advanced explosive device. This was the unleashed fundamental forces of the universe brought to bear upon a human city. Every preconceived notion he had harbored concerning the limitations and capabilities of atomic weapons had been proven utterly and catastrophically erroneous. Concurrently, in the imperial capital of Tokyo, the Supreme War Council was on the verge of receiving intelligence that would render the devastation of Hiroshima seem like a mere precursor. At precisely 11:02 a.m. on August 9th, as the influential Big Six convened to finally deliberate upon the Hiroshima reports, an aide abruptly burst into the conference room, delivering a message that instantly drained all color from the faces of every dignitary present. Nagasaki has been attacked with another atomic bomb, he declared. A profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the distinct clatter of Admiral Toyoda's pen as it slipped from his grasp and struck the polished mahogany table. Another bomb. A mere 3 days after the first. In that agonizing moment, every assumption that the Japanese military leadership had desperately clung to disintegrated with the swiftness and finality of paper consumed by flames. If the Americans possessed 2 atomic bombs, the chilling implication was that they could conceivably possess 3 or 10 or even 100. The entire bedrock of Japan's defensive strategy, the grim resolve to bleed the Americans so severely during the anticipated invasion that they would be compelled to negotiate, had just been rendered utterly meaningless. Why indeed would America undertake a costly ground invasion when they possessed the terrifying capacity to systematically erase Japanese cities from existence, one by one, until nothing remained but a desolate, radioactive wasteland? Yet, even when confronted with this apocalyptic reality, General Anami found himself unable to abandon his deeply ingrained vision of an honorable death, triumphing over a dishonored survival. "Would it not be wondrous?" he mused aloud, his voice imbued with an unsettling, almost poetic quality, "for this whole nation to be destroyed like a beautiful flower?" The other council members regarded him in stunned silence, a testament to the profound shock his words had elicited. Here stood a man so utterly dedicated to the ancient warrior's code, the Bushido, that he would deliberately choose national extinction over the perceived ignominy of national surrender. In his deeply troubled mind there existed an intrinsic purity, an aesthetically perfect conclusion, in Japan's vanishing in an atomic inferno. rather than bowing in capitulation before foreign occupiers. However, the harsh intrusion of reality was imminent, and it would manifest in the most devastating manner imaginable. On August 10th, the Japanese military successfully captured an American fighter pilot named Marcus McDilda, whose aircraft had been shot down 2 days following the Hiroshima bombing. Under intense interrogation, which regrettably included torture, McDilda reluctantly provided information that would ultimately shatter the Japanese military's remaining resistance. The crucial problem was that McDilda possessed absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about atomic bombs. He was a conventional fighter pilot who had never received a briefing on nuclear weapons. Nevertheless, faced with excruciating torture and desperate to preserve his own life, he fabricated what he believed his captors desired to hear, meticulously embellishing every conceivable detail. The Americans, McDilda falsely claimed, possessed well over 100 atomic bombs. They had the capacity, he asserted, to drop 3 such weapons per day. Tokyo, he ominously predicted, would be the next target, followed swiftly by Kyoto and then Osaka. Every major Japanese city, he concluded, would be obliterated within a matter of weeks. None of these assertions held any truth. In stark reality, the United States possessed precisely 0 atomic bombs remaining in its arsenal. The next weapon would not be ready for deployment until late August, and the production process itself was excruciatingly slow and arduous. Yet, McDilda's desperate falsehoods contained just enough technically plausible detail to be deemed credible by interrogators who were frantically grasping for any morsel of information concerning this incomprehensible new weapon. When McDilda's entirely fabricated intelligence finally reached the Supreme War Council, it landed with the impact of a final crushing blow. War Minister Anami, the very man who had so poetically articulated his vision of national destruction, now stood before his colleagues, the immense weight of absolute defeat palpable in his voice. "1 atomic bomb," he read somberly from the interrogation report, "could effectively destroy 6 square miles, an equivalent destructive power to 2,000 B-29 bombers, each armed with 300 conventional bombs. The Americans appear to possess 100 atomic bombs. They could drop 3 per day. The next target might very well be Tokyo." A profound silence once again enveloped the room, broken only by the strained, labored breathing of Admiral Suzuki. These were men who had commanded millions of soldiers, who had meticulously orchestrated complex military campaigns across the vast expanse of the Pacific, and who had, until this moment, never truly known defeat. But now, they were confronted with a weapon that rendered their extensive military expertise as utterly obsolete as samurai swords in an era dominated by machine guns. The very notion of traditional swordsmanship persisted, albeit symbolically, even as the world plunged into the era of devastating machine guns. Yet despite the advent of such overwhelming destructive power, an almost unbelievable stalemate gripped the highest echelons of Japanese leadership. 3 votes unequivocally favored surrender, a pragmatic acknowledgement of impending ruin. Conversely, 3 equally resolute votes insisted on prosecuting the war, even in the face of atomic annihilation. This profound division, threatening to prolong an already catastrophic conflict, necessitated an intervention of a magnitude utterly without precedent in the annals of Japanese history. Indeed, as the night of August 9, 1945 drew to a close, a truly extraordinary event unfolded, one that had not transpired in over a millennium of the nation. existence. Emperor Hirohito, a figure traditionally revered as a living deity and meticulously kept above the mundane fray of political decision-making, entered a solemn conference room. In a moment of profound historical significance, he personally stepped into the breach, decisively breaking the governmental deadlock that threatened to consume the empire. The tableau presented was both unparalleled and deeply surreal. The 6 venerated members of the Supreme War Council, alongside the distinguished Baron Kichiro Hiranuma, assumed formal kneeling positions around a meticulously polished table, their postures conveying profound respect and anticipation. The emperor himself, though modest in physical stature, radiated an immense aura of divine authority. It was he who then uttered words destined to not merely conclude a devastating global conflict, but to fundamentally dismantle and redefine an entire philosophical approach to warfare itself. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. I have given serious consideration to the situation at home and abroad, Hirohito declared, his voice a barely audible whisper, yet carrying the weight of ultimate imperial decree. We must bear the unbearable and suffer what is insufferable. These measured, somber pronouncements articulated a national agony and a strategic imperative of immense sacrifice, setting the course for a new, painful reality. In that pivotal moment, Japan's military commanders found themselves confronted with an agonizing and ultimate dichotomy: the cherished ideal of honor versus the stark necessity of national survival. Some prominent figures, like the sagacious Prime Minister Suzuki, demonstrated a pragmatic capacity to accept the grim, new global reality and its unavoidable implications. Others, however, such as the steadfast General Anami, chose a path rooted deeply in traditional principles, a testament to an unyielding warrior ethos. Tragically, on August 15th, mere hours before the emperor's historic surrender broadcast was transmitted to the nation, General Anami performed the ritual act of seppuku within the confines of his own residence. He departed from the world precisely as he had lived, adhering strictly to a warrior's code that the epical advent of atomic weapons had rendered devastatingly obsolete. His final poetic verse, meticulously inscribed in his own blood, eloquently expressed unwavering loyalty to the emperor and profound regret that his service could not be extended further. Poignantly, he steadfastly refused to acknowledge the fundamental, irreversible transformation that had swept across the global landscape. Yet perhaps the most poignant figure in this unfolding tragedy was Admiral Toyota, who had initially dismissed the notion of America possessing a substantial arsenal of atomic bombs with almost defiant confidence. Following the cessation of hostilities, as the full, astonishing scope of the Manhattan Project was meticulously unveiled, and as he absorbed the devastating revelation that American industrial might had achieved what Japanese scientific expertise had deemed utterly impossible, Toyota reportedly spent countless hours in profound, silent contemplation, staring at the haunting photographs of the obliterated cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The cataclysmic atomic bombings did not merely precipitate the cessation of World War II, they unequivocally signaled the demise of an entire military philosophy, one profoundly rooted in concepts of honor, self-sacrifice, and conventional battlefield engagements. Contemporary military strategists now meticulously examine this historical narrative, not simply as a chronicle of past events, but as a stark and enduring admonition concerning the perilous dangers of cognitive blindness within leadership echelons. It serves as a potent reminder of how specialized expertise can paradoxically become an intellectual confinement, how deeply ingrained professional knowledge can tragically impede leaders from recognizing and adapting to truly revolutionary shifts. Today, as humanity confronts its own array of profound technological upheavals, encompassing the rise of artificial intelligence, the complexities of cyber warfare, and the strategic implications of space-based weaponry, the harrowing account of Japan's military leadership in August 1945 retains a painfully pertinent resonance. This historical episode powerfully underscores that the most profound military catastrophes frequently originate not from the formidable might of external adversaries, but rather from an insidious internal incapacity to flexibly adapt to emerging realities. The Japanese military, for instance, found itself unable to fully comprehend or credit the devastating efficacy of America's atomic bomb, primarily because they had intellectually convinced themselves of its inherent impossibility. Their deeply held scientific understanding, their entrenched professional expertise, and their ingrained cultural confidence all ironically metamorphosed into formidable weapons, ultimately employed against their own strategic interests. Indeed, sometimes the most insidious and dangerous adversary is the unwavering certainty that one fully grasps the established rules of the game, even as another player has, unbeknownst to them, fundamentally and irrevocably altered those very rules forever.